What's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we're going to be taking a look at the Drop X Sennheiser PC38X gaming headset. Now, I purchased this myself with my own money. Drop did not send me this in any way, so this is just my completely honest feedback of this headphone or collaboration or whatever you want to call it. So let's go ahead and get into the review. So the PC38X is a recent offering from Drop. That is their most recent collab with Sennheiser. And this is like a step up over the Sennheiser PC37X, which I never reviewed, but it was a solid pick for its price at about $120. And it frequently goes on sale for less than that, but that was a solid pick. And this is the, I guess the step up model over that, because the PC37X is still for sale. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get some specs out of the way. So the PC37X is coming in at $170. It is using a 28 ohm dynamic driver with a frequency response of 10 to 30,000 hertz, and it weighs 253 grams. Now, in terms of the build of the PC38X, this thing feels really, really cheap. For those of you that watched my review of the 560S, I basically said that that was cheap feeling plastic. This is like the next level down below that. This plastic is really, really cheap feeling. Like the yokes are really, really cheap feeling plastic. Once again, very sharp edges on all the casting, even more so than the 560S. Like I feel like you could shave with how sharp this edge is right here from casting or molding this plastic or whatever. So very, very thin plastic yokes. I feel like this would actually be fairly easy to break if you stepped on it, because very, very thin all right here. Decent like click adjust. Like this actually feels solid, this click adjust system. Kind of like a rubbery kind of plastic top that doesn't feel particularly great. The headband padding is kind of like a cloth cover. Kind of feels like almost like a wetsuit material. Decently soft up there. And then interesting choice of yellow. I know a lot of people complained about this yellow, because one of the praises that the PC37X always had was its monotone color scheme that worked well in any setup. And this, they picked yellow, which not many people do yellow setups, so that's something you're going to have to get past. Pads, there's two sets of pads. This is the alternate pad, which is the velour. The standard pad is a cloth pad that's the same material as the headband padding, which I'll show you in just a bit. And then here's your microphone that when it comes down, it clicks and then it unmutes. And when you push up, it clicks and then it mutes. And on this side, you have a volume wheel, so you can just turn down your volume. Now, of note, this volume wheel really only seems to do stuff from like, this is full volume to here, and then like this much of the wheel seems to have like almost no bearing on the volume, where it only seems to work like half of the way, which is kind of weird, but I guess this is kind of nice if you want to be able to quickly turn up and down your volume. So that is the build overview of the PC38X. Now, in terms of included accessories, you get two cables. This is the first one. It is a 10-foot black and yellow kind of braided cable. Terminates in separate headphone and microphone jacks. And then this is the headphone side connector. This is a weird recessed 4-pole 2.5 millimeter. Like it's a full 4-pole, but then it's like recessed down in this jack. It's a very, very weird plug on this headphone. And this cable feels very stiff, and I really don't particularly like it. The next cable that you get is a 4-foot version of that cable that terminates in a 4-pole 3.5 millimeter. So this would be used, I'd say maybe like on laptops or possibly phones, or maybe like a Nintendo Switch or something like that. Or maybe like a controller for a console. So yeah, just a nice short 4-pole cable. This is a little bit more wieldy of a cable than the big one on the 10-foot. And then these are the pads that come installed on it. Like I mentioned, just like a cloth pad, like the top headband structure. And then you also get this soft Drop branded carrying bag for the headphones, which is a nice addition. So now into comfort of the PC38X. So PC38X has fairly standard 500 series headphone comfort. I'd say it's about the same as what the 560S was. Again, fairly clampy, maybe even slightly more than the 560. The thing has a decent amount of clamp. Solid headband padding though, so I think this is very sufficient for everybody. I don't think anybody's gonna have problems with the top headband padding. And then decently deep ear padding once again. And then you have two material choices, so you have two comfort choices there in terms of ear pad material. So I really don't think too many people are gonna have problems with these unless you're really sensitive to clamp, because they do have a decent amount of that. But all in all, I find the PC38X fairly comfortable. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do a little microphone demo of the PC38X because it is a gaming headset. So the mic quality is important, so I will see you in just a sec. All right, so here we are with the microphone on the Sennheiser PC38X. All in all, I'd say this is a fairly solid microphone for a gaming headset. The real gripes, I'd say, are wind noise, plosives, and breathing. It seems to pick up those a little bit too much for my liking. So maybe we could use a little bit more of a pop filter than what is built in. But all in all, I'd say this is a pretty good microphone for a gaming headset, and Sennheiser always does have pretty top-tier microphones for their gaming headsets. So this will certainly get the job done for gaming and voice chat. Okay, so now that the microphone section is out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the sound of the PC38X. Okay, so the PC38X has got two different pad options. They're fairly similar all in all. The velour pads are what I prefer for a couple reasons. So the velour pads seem to have a little bit more bass extension, and the treble to me sounds slightly more forward and a little bit, maybe a little bit more detailed. Something about the cloth pad seems to dull the treble a little bit in a weird way that I don't particularly like. So I would personally go with the velour pads. So basically just think the velour has got maybe an extra 2 or 3 dB of bass extension and then slightly less dull treble. So anyway, so starting with the frequency response, the PC38X has surprisingly good bass extension again for a open back dynamic driver headphone, particularly one at this price point. There is some roll off below about 50 hertz. I'd say it rolls off maybe 5 or 6 dB, but it is decent extension all in all for a open back dynamic driver headphone. After that, your lower mid range is fairly flat once again. And then coming into your upper mid-range, I would say it's fairly in line, maybe slightly forward a decibel or two, but nothing crazy there. And then your treble, even with the velour pads, is slightly down a little bit. I think they're slightly darker than what like the 560S is, and maybe a little bit more in line with where the 650 is. So your upper treble region is slightly recessed, and then your air is a bit lacking above 10K. But all in all, they are a fairly somewhat neutral frequency response, or balanced, I guess is a better term. Fairly balanced frequency response all in all on the 560S. Nothing terrible. A little bit of bass roll off. Treble's slightly off to me. Mids are decent enough, but not terrible, and a fairly good frequency response all in all on the PC38X. Now, in terms of other aspects about this headphone, so let's talk about detail. The PC38X is not particularly detailed. Everything is just kind of low res, kind of fuzzy, and a lot of that too happens to be because of the somewhat dulled transients. Everything just sounds a little bit smoothed over to me, and the transients are kind of dull. This is much more typical of, I'd say like the older school 500 series headphones. Like this is down in like maybe like HD 559 tier, maybe slightly better than that. But detail on this is fairly low overall. In terms of soundstage, I actually don't find this thing particularly wide. It's a little wider than like 6XX, but I'd say it's maybe like 560S width, if not maybe even slightly worse than that. I don't think it's particularly wide soundstage to me. Imaging, all in all, is decent enough. I don't think you'll have any problems with footsteps and gains with this. It images well enough. In terms of dynamics, it's not terrible. Again, it sounds a little bit overdamped, like I said, with the 560S. I'd say even more so in this. You can just tell it's a little bit damped. But like I said, your transients are a bit dulled. So particularly in your microdynamics, a little bit smoothed over, and the attacks on your macro stuff is a little bit dulled as well. But it's decently punchy, but it just sounds a little bit smoothed over to me. And in terms of timbre, I think it's okay. It's not terrible or anything. A little bit metallic, but fairly natural all in all, but not as good as the other two headphones that are sitting here on this table. And I believe that is all aspects of the sound on the PC38X. Okay, so now into a little bit of comparison here and my final thoughts. So the PC38X is a bit of a weird one. It's a little bit harder of a sell to me than the PC37X because the PC37X is very cheap, and in its price range, like there really aren't that many even open backs in that price range that are worthwhile, and that thing is good enough, like $120. But when you're up here to $170, we're in like serious now, big boy headphone territory, where you can get stuff like the DT880 for around the same price that is much more technically proficient than this. And we're not too far off 6XX price point, and then we're only $30 off the 560S. So the PC38X, you're going to really have to need a gaming headset. And I, for one, am an advocate of not needing a gaming headset. You're always better off with headphones plus a microphone. Get a headphone and like a Zalman ZM1 clip mic, which not quite as good as this, but it certainly suffices for game chat. If you want to spend a little bit more, Samsung Go for $30, great mic. So that's personally what I advocate for. Now, there are a few fringe cases where you absolutely need a gaming headset. And if you need a gaming headset, this is a solid pick, one of the best ones on the market. But if you want to look at it as a headphone, it's a really hard sell. I said in my review of the 560S that I think the 6XX is worth the money over the 560S. And again, that is definitely the case of 6XX over PC38X. This is a tremendously better headphone than the PC38X. Way more technically proficient, sounds much more natural. And this is a much better pick. This versus the 560S here. 560S, similar frequency response. The 560S is slightly better tuned, but this is more detailed, better transients. And this is a more refined 500 series headphone in terms of sound all in all. So 560S is a better pick over the PC38X, but again, I would really try to pay for the 6XX over both of them. But if you absolutely need a gaming headset, PC38X is a solid pick, but it does fall a little bit behind in terms of musical performance compared to similarly priced non-gaming headset offerings. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Sennheiser PC38X. Links of where to buy this in the description below, as well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.